We survived the storm, but not what was in it. Picture this. You're huddled in your basement with your family. Outside, the wind is screaming like something alive and angry. The house is shaking. The lights went out hours ago. And then, the storm passes. The silence is almost worse than the noise. You go upstairs. You open the door. The neighborhood is destroyed, but you're alive. You made it. Except, did you really? Because here's what nobody tells you about surviving something catastrophic. Sometimes what comes after is so much worse than the event itself. Sometimes the real horror doesn't arrive with thunder and lightning. Sometimes it arrives in the silence that follows. In the wreckage. In what crawls out from the places the storm tore open. My name is Nick, and I spend way too much time thinking about, we survived the storm, but not what was in it. Go ahead and hit that subscribe button and drop a like if this video helps you understand why some survivals are worse than death itself. Look, we all have this instinct, right? This deep, primal belief that if we just make it through the disaster, the hurricane, the earthquake, the flood, then we're safe. We survived. We won. Roll credits. But what if I told you that's exactly when the real danger begins? Today, I'm going to tell you about something that happened in Waveland, Mississippi in the aftermath of Hurricane Katrina. August 29, 2005. You probably remember Katrina. Category 5. One of the deadliest hurricanes in American history. Over 1,800 people dead. Cities underwater. Complete devastation. But this story isn't about the hurricane itself. This is about what came after. About a family named the Gardners who survived the storm in their attic. About what they found when they came down. About the thing that shouldn't have been there. About why, by the end of it all, they would have given anything to have died in the storm instead. And here's what most people don't realize. This isn't some ghost story. This isn't folklore. This is documented. This is real. And it's so much worse than you think. Let me set the scene for you. Thomas Gardner was a 42-year-old construction worker. Salt of the earth kind of guy. His wife, Michelle, was a teacher at the local elementary school. They had 3 kids, Daniel, 16, Cassie, 12, and little Emma, who was just 7 years old. The Gardners lived in a 2-story house about half a mile from the coast. Not smart, I know, but this was their home. 3rd generation in that house. Thomas's grandfather built it with his own hands in 1947. There was history in those walls. Memory. Well, when the evacuation orders came on August 27th, Thomas refused to leave. Now you might be thinking, that's stupid. Why would anyone stay during a Category 5 hurricane? And you're right. It was stupid. But here's the thing about people. We don't make rational decisions about the places we love. Thomas had weathered hurricanes before. Camille in '69, George in '98. He'd seen bad storms. He thought he knew what he was doing. Michelle begged him to reconsider. The kids were scared. Even Daniel, who idolized his father, kept asking if they should leave. But Thomas was stubborn. He boarded up the windows. He moved supplies to the attic. He filled the bathtubs with water. He had a plan. We'll be fine, he told his family. This house has stood for 60 years. It'll stand 60 more. It's funny how the universe punishes certainty. August 29, 2005. 6:10 a.m. Katrina made landfall. The Gardner family was in their living room when it hit. Thomas had this idea that they'd wait it out on the first floor, conserve the attic for emergencies only. But within 20 minutes, he realized he'd made a catastrophic mistake. The wind didn't sound like wind. Michelle would later describe it as the sound of God screaming. A constant, deafening roar that made your bones vibrate. The house wasn't just shaking. It was flexing like the walls were breathing. Then the water came. Not rain. Not flooding. A surge. A wall of ocean that swallowed the neighborhood in minutes. Thomas grabbed Emma and ran for the stairs. Michelle had Cassie. Daniel was right behind them. They made it to the attic just as the first floor disappeared beneath black, churning water. And here's where it gets interesting. The attic was small. maybe 12 feet by 20 feet. Cramped. Hot. There were no windows. Thomas had sealed them years ago for insulation. The only light came from 2 battery-powered lanterns. The only sound was the storm trying to rip the roof off. They huddled together in the center of the attic, away from the walls. Thomas kept checking his watch. Michelle was praying. The kids were crying. The storm lasted 14 hours. 14 hours of thinking every second might be your last. 14 hours of feeling the house sway and crack and scream. 14 hours of listening to things outside, trees, cars, other houses, being torn apart and hurled through the air. But they survived. When the wind finally stopped around 8 p.m., the silence was shocking. Absolute. Like the world had ended. Thomas waited an hour before he opened the attic door. Just to be sure. Just to be safe. And that's when things stopped making sense. The stairs were still there. Damaged but intact. The water had receded, not completely but enough. Maybe 2 feet still covering the first floor. Thomas went down first, lantern in hand. The smell hit him immediately. Salt water, sewage, rot, and something else. Something chemical and wrong. The first floor was destroyed. Furniture overturned. Walls stripped of drywall. Family photos floating in the murky water. Everything they owned ruined. But that wasn't what stopped Thomas in his tracks. It was the handprints. On the walls. Dozens of them. Wet, dark handprints that went up the staircase, leading to the attic. Small hands. Child-sized. Now you might be thinking, maybe it was one of his kids. Maybe they went down while he wasn't looking. Except, the handprints were on the outside of the attic door. Someone, or something, had been trying to get in while they were up there. Thomas called up to Michelle, told her to keep the kids in the attic. He was going to check the rest of the house. He waded through the water, lantern held high, examining each room. Everything was chaos. Destruction. But in the kitchen he found something that made his blood run cold. Sitting on the counter, the only dry surface in the entire house, was a table setting. A plate. A fork. A knife. A glass filled with clean water. Arranged perfectly. Deliberately. Like someone had been waiting for dinner. The counter was 7 feet off the ground. The storm surge hadn't reached it, which meant someone had placed those items there during the storm. While the Gardner family was trapped in the attic, someone had been in the house with them. Thomas's hand was shaking so badly he almost dropped the lantern. He checked every room, every closet, every possible hiding place. Nothing. No one. But in the master bedroom, on the bed, which was soaked and covered in debris, there was an impression. Like someone had been lying there. Recently. And here's what most people don't realize about disasters. They don't just destroy infrastructure. They destroy order. They destroy the rules we live by. In the chaos, things slip through. Things that normally stay hidden. Thomas went back upstairs. He didn't tell Michelle about the handprints or the table setting. Not yet. He just said the house was clear, they were safe, they'd wait until morning to leave. But he didn't sleep that night. None of them did. Because around 2 a.m. they heard it, footsteps. Slow. Deliberate. Sloshing through the water below. Now here's where the story splits. Half of you are thinking this is just trauma. Stress. Fear playing tricks. The other half. You already know something was down there. Michelle heard it first. She sat bolt upright, grabbed Thomas's arm. "Someone's in the house," she whispered. Thomas listened. At first, nothing. Then, there it was. Splash. 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 Someone walking through the water below. Slow and methodical. Daniel heard it too. Dad. Thomas put a finger to his lips. Silence. The footsteps stopped. They waited. 1 minute. 2. 5. Then the stairs creaked. Someone was coming up. Thomas grabbed the only weapon he had, a claw hammer from his supply box. He positioned himself between his family and the attic door. His heart was hammering so hard he thought his ribs might crack. The footsteps reached the top of the stairs. Then, nothing. 30 seconds of absolute silence. Then a voice. A child's voice. A little girl. "Can I come in?" Emma gasped. Michelle's hand flew to her mouth. "I'm scared," the voice said. "Please let me in. The water's so cold." Thomas's mind was racing. Was this another survivor? A neighbor's child? Someone who'd been trapped like they were? But something was wrong. The voice was flat, emotionless, like someone reading from a script. "Dad," Daniel whispered. "Should we?" "Shoo. Please," the voice said again. "I'm so cold. I just want to get warm." Thomas moved closer to the door. He could see the gap at the bottom, about an inch of space. And in that gap he saw feet. Bare feet. Small. A child's feet. But they weren't moving. They were perfectly still. And the skin, even in the dim light, Thomas could see the skin was wrong. Too pale. Almost gray. "Who are you?" Thomas called out. Silence. "Are you hurt? Where are your parents?" The feet didn't move. "I'm alone," the voice finally said. "Everyone's gone. Please let me in." Something in Thomas's gut twisted. Every instinct was screaming at him, "Don't open that door." "We can't right now," he said, trying to keep his voice steady. "It's not safe. But in the morning when it's light, we'll come out and help you, okay?" Silence. Then, "Why won't you let me in?" The voice had changed. Sharper. Accusatory. "I said please. I'm cold. I'm scared. Why won't you help me?" Michelle was holding Emma and Cassie close, both girls trembling. "We will help you," Thomas said. "In the morning. I promise." The feet shifted slightly. Then the voice spoke again, and this time it was different. Older. Deeper. "You're lying. And here's where it gets really interesting." The door handle started to turn. Thomas threw his weight against the door. He'd locked it, but the lock was old, flimsy. Not meant to keep out someone who really wanted in. The handle turned all the way. The door pushed inward an inch. Thomas braced his feet, pushed back. On the other side he could feel resistance. Steady. Strong. Too strong for a child. "Michelle," he shouted. "Help me." She ran over, added her weight to his. Daniel joined them. The three of them pushing against the door while Cassie and Emma huddled in the corner. The pressure from the other side increased. The old wood cracked. The hinges groaned. Then suddenly it stopped. The pressure vanished. Thomas stumbled forward, almost fell. Silence. They waited, listening. Footsteps again. But this time they were moving away. Back down the stairs. Splash. 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 Then nothing. Thomas, Michelle, and Daniel looked at each other, breathing hard, not speaking. What could they say? They reinforced the door with everything they had. Boxes, the water container, anything heavy. Then they retreated to the far corner of the attic and waited for dawn. But dawn brought no relief. Because when the sun came up and Thomas finally, carefully opened the attic door, he saw something that made his mind fracture. The handprints were still there. But there were more now. Hundreds of them. All over the walls. All over the ceiling. Small hands. Reaching. Grasping. And in the water below, floating face down, was a child's dress. Old-fashioned. From another era. But no body. Just the dress. Thomas knew right then that they had to leave. Immediately. Whatever was in this house, whatever had survived the storm with them, it wasn't human. Getting out should have been simple. Wade through the water, break through the boarded-up front door, get to higher ground. But nothing about this was simple anymore. Thomas went down first again. The water was lower now, barely above his ankles. The morning light filtering through cracks in the boards showed the full extent of the damage. The house was gutted. A corpse. He helped Michelle down, then the kids. Emma was clinging to her mother, wouldn't let go. Cassie was silent, eyes wide, scanning every shadow. Daniel was trying to be brave, but his hands were shaking. They made their way to the front of the house. Thomas pulled boards off the door. Wood splintered. Nails shrieked. Finally, enough space to squeeze through. Outside, the neighborhood was apocalyptic. Houses reduced to foundations. Cars wrapped around trees. Bodies, he tried not to look at the bodies. But they were out. They were free. They started walking toward what used to be the main road. The sun was hot, brutal. The smell of death was everywhere. That's when Emma stopped. "Mommy," she said. "The girl from the attic. She's following us." Michelle spun around. "What? Where?" Emma pointed. About 50 yards behind them, standing perfectly still in the middle of the destroyed street, was a little girl. She looked about Emma's age. She was wearing the dress, the old-fashioned dress from the water. Her hair hung in wet strings around her face. Her skin was that same gray pale Thomas had seen through the door gap, and she was smiling. "Keep walking," Thomas said, his voice tight. "Don't look at her. Just keep walking." They walked faster. The girl followed, always maintaining the same distance, never getting closer, never falling behind, just following. For 2 miles she followed them. Other survivors passed them, didn't seem to notice the girl. Emergency workers, National Guard. Nobody else saw her. Finally, they reached the evacuation center, a high school that had been converted into a shelter. Hundreds of people. Chaos. Relief workers handing out water and food. Thomas turned around one last time. The girl was standing at the edge of the parking lot, still smiling, still watching. Then she tilted her head, slowly, at an angle no neck should bend, and she turned and walked away back toward the ruins. Thomas never saw her again. But Emma did. The Gardner family was evacuated to a shelter in Jackson, Mississippi. From there, they moved in with Michelle's sister in Tennessee. They never went back to Waveland. Never rebuilt. They couldn't. But here's what most people don't realize. Leaving didn't end it. Emma started having nightmares. Every night. The same dream. She was back in the attic and the girl was there with them. Had always been there. Sitting in the corner, watching, waiting. In the dreams, Emma would ask, "Who are you?" And the girl would smile and say, "I'm the one who stayed." The nightmares got worse. Emma started sleepwalking. They'd find her standing in front of doors trying to get out. Or sometimes, and this was worse, trying to let something in. Michelle took her to therapists. They talked about trauma, PTSD, survivor's guilt. They prescribed medication. Nothing helped. Because this wasn't trauma. This was something else. 6 months after Katrina, Thomas got a call from a local historian in Waveland. A woman named Dr. Patricia Simmons who was documenting the storm's impact. She'd been investigating the Gardner house, looking through old records, and she'd found something. In 1947, when Thomas's grandfather built the house, he'd built it on the site of an older structure. A house that had burned down in 1921. In that fire, a family had died. Parents and their young daughter. The daughter's name was Emily. She was 7 years old, the same age as Emma. Dr. Simmons sent Thomas a photograph she'd found in the county archives. A class photo from 1920. And there, in the second row, was a little girl with dark hair and a distinctive smile. Thomas showed the photo to Emma. She went pale. Started shaking. "That's her," Emma whispered. "That's the girl from the attic." Now, here's where it gets really interesting, and here's what most people don't realize about disasters and the supernatural. They're more connected than you think. Storms don't just destroy buildings. They disturb ground. They shift foundations. They break seals that have held for decades. Sometimes they open doors that were meant to stay closed. Hurricane Katrina didn't just devastate the Gulf Coast. It awakened things. Disturbed things. Things that had been sleeping in the ground, in the ruins of old houses, in the bones of the dead. Thomas started researching. He found dozens of stories from Katrina survivors. Stories that never made the news. Stories of people seeing things in the aftermath. Hearing things. Being followed by things. A family in Biloxi who found wet footprints leading to their children's beds every morning. A man in New Orleans who was trapped in his attic for 3 days and swore something else was up there with him, breathing in the darkness. A woman in Gulfport who survived the storm only to drown in her bathtub 2 weeks later. Doors locked from the inside, no explanation. The pattern was clear. The storm hadn't just killed people. It had released something, or many somethings, and the Gardners had encountered one of them. By 2007, Emma's condition had deteriorated. The nightmares were constant. She'd lost weight, stopped talking to her friends, stopped going to school. The doctors were baffled. Physically, there was nothing wrong with her, but she was wasting away. One night, Michelle found Emma in the bathroom, staring at herself in the mirror. She was whispering something over and over. Michelle listened. "I'm the one who stayed. I'm the one who stayed. I'm the one who stayed." But it wasn't Emma's voice. Michelle grabbed her daughter, shook her. "Emma. Emma, wake up." Emma blinked, looked at her mother, and smiled that same tilted smile. "She wants me to come back," Emma said in her normal voice. "She's so lonely. She's been alone for so long. She just wants a friend." "No," Michelle said, voice breaking. "No, baby, you can't. You can't go back there." "But Mommy," Emma said, "I never left." And here's what most people don't realize about hauntings. They're not always about ghosts staying behind. Sometimes they're about ghosts taking something with them. A piece, a connection, a tether. Emily had latched onto Emma. Maybe because they were the same age. Maybe because Emma was the only other child in that attic. Maybe because, in that moment when the door almost opened, something passed between them. Thomas knew what they had to do. He'd been researching, reading, talking to people who understood these things. They had to go back. They had to sever the connection. They had to return to Waveland, to the ruins of the Gardner house, and they had to end this. Michelle fought him, screamed at him. But Emma was dying, slowly, invisibly, being pulled into something else. So in March 2007, the Gardner family drove back to Mississippi. The house was gone, completely demolished after the storm. The lot was empty except for the foundation, cracked concrete and broken pipes. But the moment they pulled up, Emma perked up. For the first time in months, she looked alert, alive. "She's here," Emma said. "She's been waiting." They got out of the car. It was late afternoon. Golden light across the ruins. Everything looked so normal, so peaceful. Except it wasn't. Thomas had brought someone with him. A woman named Sarah Toussaint, a spiritual worker from New Orleans. Someone who knew how to deal with things like this. Sarah walked the property, saying nothing, just feeling. Finally, she stopped at the center of where the house had been. "Here," she said. "This is where she died. Where they all died." She turned to Thomas. "You understand what you're asking? To break this connection, you have to give her what she wants." "What does she want?" Michelle demanded. Sarah looked at Emma. Acknowledgement. Recognition. She's been forgotten for almost 90 years. No grave. No memorial. No one to remember her name. She latched onto your daughter because Emma saw her. Really saw her. She just wants to exist. To be remembered. That's it. Thomas said. "We just remember her? And forgive her," Sarah added. "She didn't mean to scare you. She's a child. A lonely, frightened child who doesn't understand that she's dead." They held a small ceremony right there on the foundation. Sarah led them through it. They spoke Emily's name, acknowledged her death, honored her memory. Michelle said a prayer. Emma stood in the center, eyes closed, lips moving silently. Then she opened her eyes and smiled, her real smile, not that tilted thing. She said, "Thank you," Emma whispered. She said she can go now. The air changed, lightened, like a pressure releasing. It was over. They thought it was over. Emma got better, gradually but steadily. The nightmare stopped. She started eating again, laughing, being a kid. The Gardner family rebuilt their lives. Thomas got work in construction in Tennessee. Michelle went back to teaching. The kids grew up. Daniel graduated high school, went to college. Cassie became an artist. Emma became a social worker. Years passed. 15 years. And then, in 2020, during the COVID-19 lockdowns, Emma got a message on Facebook from someone named Patricia Simmons, the historian. "I need to tell you something," the message said. "Something I should have told your father in 2006, but I was scared. I didn't think it mattered anymore. I was wrong." Emma called her. They talked for 2 hours. And Dr. Simmons revealed the truth. The little girl who died in the 1921 fire, her name wasn't Emily. It was Amelia. Emily was something else. Dr. Simmons had found more records after that first call with Thomas. Older records, dating back to the 1850s. There had been another house on that land before the one that burned, a plantation house. And in that house, in 1856, a little girl named Emily had died. Not in a fire. Not in an accident. She'd been murdered. By her own mother. The mother had been suffering from what they'd call postpartum psychosis today. Had drowned Emily in a bathtub, then killed herself. The property had been cursed ever since. Multiple families. Multiple tragedies. All involving children. The 1921 fire wasn't an accident. The mother had set it, trying to kill her daughter, who she claimed was talking to someone who wasn't there. Emily had been haunting that land for over 150 years. And the ritual they performed? The acknowledgement? The forgiveness? It hadn't sent Emily away. It had invited her in. Emma sat in her apartment, phone in her hand, listening to Dr. Simmons explain the history. The pattern. The trap. "I'm so sorry," Dr. Simmons said. "I should have warned you. The spiritual worker you consulted, she probably didn't know. Emily is smart. She's had over a century to learn how to manipulate people. How to appear sympathetic. How to make people want to help her." "But Emma got better," Emma protested. "The nightmare stopped. She went away." "Did she?" Dr. Simmons asked quietly. And that's when Emma realized. The voice in her head that she'd learned to ignore, the one that whispered sometimes late at night when she was alone, that wasn't her internal monologue. The urge she sometimes got to stand in front of mirrors and stare at her own reflection, that wasn't normal. The fact that she'd become a social worker, specifically working with children, specifically seeking out the most troubled ones, that wasn't entirely her choice. Emily hadn't left. She'd just learned to be quiet, to blend in, to wait. "What does she want?" Emma asked, though she already knew the answer. "What she's always wanted," Dr. Simmons said. "What she was denied when her mother killed her. Life. And she's willing to take it from someone else." Emma looked down at her hands. They were shaking. In the reflection of her dark phone screen, she could see someone standing behind her. A little girl with wet hair and a tilted smile. "I'm the one who stayed," the reflection whispered. "Here's what most people don't realize about possession. It's not like the movies. It's not dramatic. There's no head spinning, no projectile vomiting. It's subtle, gradual, a slow erosion of self. It's making choices that don't feel like choices. It's becoming someone you don't recognize. It's looking in the mirror and not being sure who's looking back." Emma called her family, told them everything. Thomas broke down sobbing. Michelle went silent. They wanted to help, but what could they do? This wasn't 2007 anymore. Emma wasn't a child. She was 22 years old. She had her own life, her own apartment, and something was living in her head. They consulted experts, real ones this time. Priests, spiritual workers from multiple traditions, psychologists who specialized in dissociative disorders. Everyone said the same thing. The connection was too old, too deep. Emily had been with Emma for 15 years, since the moment they performed that ritual on the foundation. She'd woven herself into Emma's identity. To remove her would be like removing part of Emma's soul. Some scars don't heal. Some wounds don't close. Some storms never really end, they just go quiet for a while. Emma still lives in Tennessee. She still works with children. She's good at her job. Really good. Maybe too good. Her family watches her carefully. They talk to her every day. They look for signs, changes. But Emma seems fine. Happy even. Except sometimes when she thinks no one is looking, she tilts her head at that impossible angle. And sometimes, late at night, her neighbors hear a child's voice singing in her apartment. Old songs. From the 1850s. Songs a 22-year-old in 2020 shouldn't know. The Gardner family survived Hurricane Katrina. They made it through one of the deadliest natural disasters in American history. But they didn't survive what was in it. Because some things don't kill you in the moment. Some things are patient. They wait. They watch. They follow you home and learn how to become part of you. And the worst part? The truly terrifying part? They do it with a smile. So here's what I want you to take away from this. When disaster strikes, when everything falls apart, when you're huddled in the dark waiting for the storm to pass, pay attention to what else is waiting with you. Because survival isn't always a blessing. Sometimes it's just the beginning of something worse. The Gardners survived the storm. But Emily never left. She's still there. Still waiting. Still patient. And if you ever find yourself in an attic during a disaster, and you hear a child's voice asking to be let in, remember this story. And keep that door locked. Thanks for watching. If this story messed you up as much as it should have, hit that subscribe button. Drop a like. Share it with someone who thinks they'd survive anything. Because now you know, surviving is just the first challenge. Living with what you survived, that's the real horror. I'm Nick, and I spend way too much time thinking about the things we bring home from disasters. Things we can never get rid of. Things that smile when they look at us. See you in the next one. If Emily lets you go.